The original Knack was something of a Marmite game. Many people loathed it, but there was a few folks who thought it was a decent game. Either way you swung, the game was rather important as it was the first PS4 title we ever saw. But unfortunately, when the game came out on the console's launch, it was a rather disappointing title, and the game was a butt of many jokes. Nevertheless, the game must have been popular as here we are, just over 4 years later, the game has finally received a sequel. But will it right the wrongs of the original? Let's find out. First up, I'll start with the game's story, and that sees the goblins back from the first game as they're trying to bring back robots from the dead to take over the world. So it's up to Knack and his band of human companions to stop them. It's a strange tale that is told through some flashbacks, and while it's nothing really special, the story is straightforward enough for kids to enjoy, but adults will probably get a bit fed up. The story isn't really the problem, it's just that bloody script. It's awful, feeling like a collection of cliché lines from various movies. The villains themselves are a joke with nothing special to say. Equally, the human allies of Knack just blab a load of crap. They even try to add layers to the characters by making Lucas, the awkward teen that follows Knack around, a lovesick puppy. It's all rather pitiful and cringe-worthy stuff. As for the game's leading character, Knack, you'd think he'd be a pretty decent character, as his name is on the title of the freaking box. But no, Knack is a soulless and boring character that just lacks personality whatsoever. The only good thing about Knack's personality is when he's small, he's mute, and he's a little bit cute. As for the gameplay now, the gameplay feels very much like the original game. You explore rather linear levels with hardly any room for exploration, while smacking various enemies and partaking in some platforming moments. The game starts off in a city that's been attacked by robots and see Knack exploring various different areas of the world in his quest to save it. Though it should be known that the game's first level is repeated later on in the game, which is quite annoying as there's nothing new in that level, so it feels like a wasted 30 minutes of stuff you've already done. Whilst the games still sound very much the same and the levels are far too linear, the game has seen some great changes, most notably in the combat department. The original game was a kinda iconic first lack of combat moves as Knack only had a few punch and kick attacks, and that was it. And while these basic punches and kicks are still here, thankfully the game includes many new abilities for Knack, regularly dropping moves for our hero. A few examples of these moves are a heavy punch that can break an enemy's block, a boomerang which can incapacitate enemies, to even a hook shot which can pull enemies towards you. The game also has a skill tree which grants you new abilities and boosts for your power and speed, and can be quite useful to take advantage of. You may start off the game with a few basic moves, but by halfway through the game, you'll have plenty of moves to use against the hordes of enemies that stand in your way. One of the things that made the original Knack a bit of a pain in the backside was the uneven difficulty. As for a kids game, it did kinda get quite hard. Having difficulty spikes and Knack being killed in a couple of hits was rather annoying. Thankfully, Knack 2 is a much fairer experience. Knack has more health for starters, and it also regenerates, plus having more combat moves do help you quite a lot. You shouldn't be dying as much as you did in the original. I played this on the hard mode and it provided a decent challenge, and if you're a more experienced gamer, that's a difficulty you should play on. The game's also fully playable in 2-player co-op mode, which is great. It sees 2 Knacks going around the level and it's really fun. If you played any of the LEGO games before, then Knack 2 multiplayer feels quite similar, and that's a good thing indeed. The game's 15 chapters are all fairly lengthy and all are broken up into multiple sub-chapters. To complete the game it will take you a rather long 12 to 15 hours depending on if you watch the cutscenes or not. And once the credits roll you'll probably have thinking about deleting it off your hard drive, but don't, as the game includes an abundance of post-game content. First up you have a New Game Plus mode which allows you to go back through the game with all your new powers and moves. Then you've also got some fun new time attack modes and Coliseum fights, which are great little modes that kind of remind me of the challenge maps from the Batman Arkham games. And the last big bit of post-game content is the chapter replay mode, which allows you to replay all the game's levels in whatever order you like, but with a difference. Each level has multiple different challenges to complete, and once you've completed them, then you get a Knack medal, and with over 100 Knack medals to get, there's plenty to get stuck into. And kudos for Sony for making this game a £30 budget price game, as this is a complete bargain for the amount of content on offer. Presentation wise, the game has the same art style to the original, and it does feature some nice visual improvements to the character models and the levels themselves. The game also has some nice pro enhancements, like the ability to play the game entirely at a locked 60 FPS with hardly any drops. There's also an option to play at 30 FPS but with a few graphical improvements, and that's also at a steady frame rate as well. It's certainly a nice improvement over the original, which had an uneven unlocked frame rate which could be all over the shop. Thankfully, it's much steady here. Conclusion time now, and even with its rubbish storyline, terrible script and far too linear levels, Knack 2 is a big improvement over the original. Knack's new arsenal of moves make combat rather enjoyable, and the two-player co-op is a great inclusion. Add in plenty of post-game content and a lengthy single-player campaign, all for a rather reasonable £30 price tag, it does make Knack 2 a rather justifiable purchase for those who even wrote off the original. Knack 2 gets a 7 out of 10 with the title of good. Thank you for watching my review, like, rate and subscribe, and until next time, happy gaming, bye!